Now, tensions between the Philippines and China spiked once again this week over the South China Sea. Manila released footage of China's coastguard firing water cannons at its vessels and summoned Beijing's deputy ambassador to the country. And as our correspondent James Chater reports, the spat raised questions for the Philippines about how to deal with Chinese aggression in the disputed waters.
Passing directly in front of this Philippine supply boat, a white Coast Guard ship of China. Then this. 4 Filipino crew members were injured this week when a Chinese water cannon shattered the vessel's window. Actions Manila described as illegal and irresponsible. It's the latest escalation in maritime tensions between China and the Philippines, which have competing sovereignty claims in the South China Sea. The encounter occurred near the second Thomas Shoal, one of at least 2 atolls claimed by both countries. They fall within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, in yellow here, but also within China's so-called 9-dash line, the area Beijing claims as its own. That's despite an international court ruling in 2016 that its claims had no legal basis. China's Coast Guard fleet is now the largest in the world, and analysts say altercations like this show it's taking on a more aggressive role in pursuing Beijing's maritime interests. It recently ramped up patrols around the Taiwanese islands of Jinmen, territory within eyeshot of the Chinese mainland, which Beijing views as its own. But all that stoking fears maritime spats could spiral into great power conflict involving the United States. The US is Taiwan's most important ally and arms provider, and Manila has a mutual defense treaty with Washington. Beijing has repeatedly accused the US of using both Taiwan and the Philippines to push back against China's maritime claims. But at a meeting of regional leaders in Australia this week, the Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. said great power politics weren't behind his country's response. He says he was protecting Philippine interests alone.
Such undue emphasis tends to subsume the legitimate rights and interests of countries like the Philippines, Australia, and other ASEAN member states into the interests of the so-called major countries, as if we are mere pawns with no strategic agency.
Manila has stopped short of calling for the Mutual Defense Treaty to be activated. But with maritime confrontations now more frequent, it's also becoming more challenging for each side to strike a balance in these hotly contested waters.
For more, let's pull in Southeast Asia security analyst Richard Hedarian, who joins me now from Manila. Richard, we've seen several incidents like this in recent months. Is it only a matter of time before the next one?
Well, definitely that's what perhaps the Chinese side wants us to believe. I mean, there are growing discussions inside China. In fact, some of their experts, analysts, defense folks are openly saying that it's time for China to show its swords, to impress upon the Philippines its preponderance of superiority when it comes to naval prowess. But the reality is that the more the Chinese are pushing the Philippines, the more the Philippines is going to double down on its alliances, not only with the United States, but also its partnership with a whole host of countries from Europe and across the Indo-Pacific. So we're really in this difficult situation whereby each side is testing the limits of the other side. But I think as far as the Philippines is concerned, President Marcos Jr. has made it clear this is a red line. There's no way that they're going to compromise on a single inch of Philippines claims in the area. And the Philippines wants to, albeit grudgingly, get the respect of China, because I think China was too much used to kind of a subservient Philippines under former President Rodrigo Duterte.
But how far do these Filipino red lines go? I mean, are you worried that this situation could potentially get out of hand to the detriment of the Philippines?
Well, I mean, this is not riskless, right? This is a very difficult situation. As far as the Philippines is concerned, it's facing, what I call, strategic gaslighting. I mean, we have China blaming the Philippines for standing for its own rights and sometimes completely denying the Philippines strategic agency. I mean, let's not forget, the Philippines is not doing this because this is the territory of America or sovereign rights of, Japan or another country. This is about the Philippines' own sovereign rights. And I don't think any Filipino president can survive a situation whereby he's seen as succumbing to China. Having said that, I think China is also scratching its head because it wants to impress upon the Philippines the preponderance of its force, but so far it's not working. The more they push the Philippines, the more the Philippines is going to dig in, and the more the Philippines is going to ask for help from other allies and partners.
You recently said that the growing tension with China is a chance for the Philippines to refound the country. I'm scratching my head. What did you mean by that?
Well, I mean, many people tend to forget. I mean, the Philippines has been seen as, the American ally, and some even more negatively, they see as Philippines as some, I don't know, banana republic who has been relying on America for a long time. I mean, that caricature, I think, shapes China's foreign policy. But the reality is that more than a century ago, the Filipinos were at the forefront of fighting against Western imperialism. First the Spanish, then the Americans. But having said that, it is also true that the Philippines has so much relied on America for the past few decades or so that it's finally now getting the opportunity to prove its mettle. And finally, I think as far as the Filipino people are concerned, they're beginning to have a more concrete sense of their national identity in contraposition to the kind of bullying, aggressive behavior they're seeing from China. So I think this is also a chance for the Philippines to strategically mature and also carve out its own space among the more proud nations in this part of the world.
We'll leave it there for the time being. Always a pleasure talking to you, Richard. Thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure.